It is now time to begin the presentation on our individual and family support unit. So Jasmine, take it away for us.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. Before we get into the presentation, we are going to take a moment to introduce ourselves. So, again, I am Jasmine. I am an advocate in the Individual and Family Support Unit with the Justice Center. I have been working with the Justice Center for just about a year, and I work out of the White Plains location. Prior to coming to the Justice Center, I worked in nonprofits under OPWDD in direct care and different provider agencies through them.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Athena Rosario. I am an advocate out of our Plainview office. I have been with the Justice Center a little under a year. And prior to working at the Justice Center, I worked for a provider agency under the Office of Children and Family Services for about 6 years in juvenile justice. And then prior to that, I worked as a paraprofessional for the Department of Education. I want to remind everyone that you'll receive a copy of the materials. They're available to you days after the presentation. And there's also going to be some links for helpful resources during our presentation. Okay. So today we'll be spending some time telling you about the Justice Center, along with providing an overview of our individual and family support unit, the ways in which we provide support and services to individuals receiving services and their families. You may hear us refer to the Individual and Family Support Unit as IFSU, which is our acronym, throughout the presentation. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll share some helpful resources again and some links with you all. And we'll also answer some of the questions that the audience might have.
Just waiting for it to go to the next slide. Yes, so as we stated, we'd like to take a minute just to provide a brief overview of the Justice Center for the protection of people with special needs. So the Justice Center was established in 2013 by the Protection of People with Special Needs Act. The agency was created in order to restore public trust in the institutions and individuals responsible for caring for vulnerable populations by protecting the health, safety, dignity, and of the individuals receiving services. Prior to the establishment of the agency, there was no consistent way to prevent staff who committed serious acts of abuse from getting another job working with vulnerable populations. And additionally, inconsistent laws, rules, regulations, requirements, and standards across service systems presented challenges to providing the best care for stakeholders.
So just a little bit about our vision here at the Justice Center. Our vision is that people with special needs shall be protected from abuse, neglect, and mistreatment. This will be accomplished by assuring that the state maintains the nation's highest standards of health, safety, and dignity, and by also supporting the dedicated people who provide services.
So the Justice Center has jurisdiction over more than 1 million individuals receiving services across 6 different state agencies. Our jurisdiction includes all programs operated, licensed, and certified by these six state agencies. Many of the reports that the Justice Center receives are from the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, or OPWDD. A few examples of the areas our jurisdiction covers with this are intermediate care facilities, individual residence alternatives, and family care homes. Jurisdiction over the Office of Mental Health, or OMH, includes inpatient hospital psychiatric units, community residences, and community treatment programs. And you can also see the list of the 6 agencies that are currently under our jurisdiction.
Okay, in terms of making reports to the Justice Center, some of you may have had the experience of calling in a report to our hotline, as I did when I was a case planner with OCFS, or Office of Children and Family Services. So our hotline is also known as the Vulnerable Persons Central Register. This is a mouthful, and we love acronyms here at the Justice Center, so you will often hear us refer to this as the VPCR. Our agency operates a toll-free hotline. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for receiving reports of allegations and abuse or allegations of abuse and neglect. So allegations of abuse and neglect can be made by anyone. This includes a parent, an advocate, a guardian, the individual themselves, even staff. And we do encourage people to make a report to the VPCR when they have knowledge or have reason to believe that an individual receiving services has been abused, neglected, or mistreated.
So we also want to highlight that the Justice Center also has an advisory council. This advises and assists us in developing policies, proposed regulations, plans, and programs to carry out the Justice Center's functions, powers, and duties. So at least 1/2 of the members of the council are people who are receiving services or have in the past, as well as family members of those receiving services. So we can't do this alone, and collaborating with the council is especially vital in order for us to carry out our vision and mission.
Now to speak to you a little bit about the case life cycle. The Justice Center investigates, reviews, and makes final determinations in cases of alleged abuse or neglect committed by staff members. And staff can include anyone from employees, volunteers, interns, consultants, or contractors of a facility or provider agency. So the life cycle begins with the allegation or report being made to the Justice Center, the VPCR, as we discussed earlier. And then the call center representative in intake collects all the information from the reporter. As much detail as can be provided is very helpful to the call center representative. The rep then assigns the incident number for your reference, and sometimes you'll hear this incident number be referred to as a confirmation number as well. You'll then see that it gets classified, it will be investigated, or an investigation launches, and then a determination is made, and that's when determination letters will be mailed.
So the Individual Family Support Unit, or IFSU, as we like to call it, started in October 2013, shortly after the Justice Center was in operation. At that time, the unit was in its infancy, and the extent of the need for supportive services was still unknown at the time. In time, however, the growing need for assistance to individuals and families going through Justice Center processes was identified, and the unit grew based on that need.
If you see the map, we have 5 regions currently. And this is just a map of the Individual and Family Support Unit and where we provide support statewide. The map displays the 5 Justice Center regions, as I said, and each star represents where our staff is located. When IFSU, we have about 20 total staff throughout the state, including advocates, coordinators, support staff, a unit director, and assistant director. And in terms of background, all of our advocates come from a variety of educational backgrounds and professional experiences, such as family court, mental health court, child advocacy centers, domestic violence shelters, rape crisis programs, direct service within provider programs, and case management. So you'll see the I guess like blue or teal color, that's Region 5, that's where Jasmine is. And then the green one, Plainview, which is at the bottom, Region 4, that's my region.
So how do our advocates in the Individual and Family Support Unit assist individuals and families? So a big part of our role is to work with individuals receiving services and their families to guide them through the Justice Center processes, such as reporting, interviewing, final determinations, and general inquiries. We provide support during Justice Center-led interviews. Our advocates provide emotional support before, during, and after these interviews. We also often speak with the individual in order to check on their emotional state, provide reassurance and validation, and ask if they need to take breaks. This is especially important given the information that these individuals share with us during the interviews. So we want to ensure that they're as comfortable as possible and that we're taking a trauma-informed approach. So also another important role relates to providing case status updates. Our advocates often make contact with individuals and their family members via the phone to provide an overview of the New York State Justice Center and processes and explain what the case status is without going into too much detail. It is often helpful. We are able to let someone know if the case is still active or when they should be expecting the letter of determination in the mail. We also provide information by sharing relevant Justice Center resources, which we'll be discussing later on in the presentation. And then we also want to note that advocates often provide support throughout the life cycle of a case. And in certain cases, we provide ongoing support well beyond the conclusion of cases.
Okay, so we do feel that it's important to share some data with you reflecting the different areas where IFSU has provided support. As of January 1st, 2025, nearly 25,000 individuals and family members have contacted advocates for assistance since the establishment of the Justice Center in 2013. So it's important to note that that number does not reflect speaking with people more than one time. So you can imagine that in actuality, the number is much, much larger. And then these next three numbers in our most recent data from 2024, last year we provided roughly 4,300 individuals with family members with advocacy and support. We also provided 1,450 supports with records access, which includes information about Jonathan's Law and Social Service Law 496. And lastly, we went on 804 accompaniments where IFSU advocates provide support during interviews for the Justice Center-led investigations.
Okay, so now we're each going to give you a little case study example of some interactions that we've had this past year. So my example is I was connected with a parent and regarding their daughter through the investigator for a case who wanted me to reach out and provide information on next steps and overviews of our processes. The parents did have many questions about the investigative process as it was their first time dealing with the Justice Center, and they wanted to know best ways to communicate with the provider agency while the investigation was ongoing. So I was able to provide them with information on what to expect from the start to finish of the investigation, as well as explained what happens during the process. In this case, it was a criminal case, so there was police involvement. And so I explained the differences between the police case and the Justice Center case and how we interact, basically providing parallel investigations for the incident. And I also worked with them as they went to the DA's office, as the individual did. It was debated as whether they were going to speak in front of the court. So I helped them through that process as well. I also explained what the differences in the letter of determination would be, what potential outcomes were, and what they could expect moving forward as the case closed. The family was very involved throughout this case, and I still regularly communicate with this family member. They've provided them resources in terms of emotional health and well-being as they process the situation, and they still call me to receive resources as they move forward and process what next steps are. They also wanted resources in terms of deciding whether or not they were going to change providers. So I was able to provide them resources on how to deal with whether they were going to remain with the current provider agency or switch. And I've had communication with them for about 10 months, and I've helped them through the process of how they're going to continue receiving services as well.
One of the cases that I was on I was connected to them through investigations and accompanied them on an interview. I was with the personal representative and then also spoke with the victim themselves, the individual receiving services. And so I accompanied them on the interview just to provide emotional support. Following the interview, I noticed that they had a lot of questions about the process, of what comes next, what to look forward to. And then also they provided some incident or confirmation numbers as well that they wanted an update on. So we scheduled a call immediately after the interview. I was able to provide status updates for the rest of the incidents and then also connect them, the personal representative, with who they could reach out to for those significant incidents or non-Justice Center incidents. And then I was able to provide status up monthly. I would say we connected about 6 months ago. And following that investigation closing and then receiving the letter of determination, we were able to go through the letter and then follow up with records access, the information that they would need to request the records access information. When another incident was called in and then classified and an investigation launched for abuse neglect, I was able to connect with the personal representative again, and we're currently still working together, providing status updates, and they're just walking through that process. In addition to everything that we've shared, what we can provide, we wanted to discuss a few examples of what is outside of our abilities. So the chart helps to showcase some of those examples. During our initial call with an individual receiving services or their personal representative, we can provide explanations of the Justice Center process, but we cannot provide details about the investigation. So while investigations are active, it's important that we maintain their integrity, therefore not divulging specific details. We can also provide you with status updates, for example, letting you know if the case is still active or when it's closed, if that letter of determination is being sent out, and then just kind of explain or walk through the contents of the letter together. And again, those letters are sent at the closure of the investigation. We're not able to expedite the investigation. With any investigation, it's essential to be thorough, and we want to leave no stone left unturned, as they say. We can make referrals and provide contact information for state agencies and providers. And we do often contact family members with points of contact and also refer them to helpful community resources. We cannot provide direct case management, however, in situations where someone's receiving services or their family member needs support with accessing services long-term. We would refer them to their case manager, social worker, or provide contact information to obtain those supports if they don't have them in place already.
So another large part of the advocate's role is to collaborate with others, both internally and externally. One way we do this is by utilizing a multidisciplinary approach, which has been especially effective in carrying out victim-centered and trauma-informed practices that we exercise and promote at the Justice Center. An example of utilizing this approach is demonstrated by the agency's utilization of the Justice Center's Sexual Abuse Response Team, or SART. This team is made up of staff with diverse backgrounds, including nurses, attorneys, advocates, and investigators, many of whom who have worked in settings under the Justice Center's jurisdiction. The investigator on the team will connect with an advocate at the very start of a case. Advocates will offer assistance in regards to scheduling interviews and oftentimes make the initial contact with the individual and their family prior to meeting with the investigator. Advocates may be made aware of additional information that may be beneficial to the investigator. This could include best communication methods, best time of day to meet, what to look for in terms of stress or triggers. An example might be that the individual receiving services may react negatively to someone wearing a suit. So the advocate would relay that to the investigator to ensure that the investigator is wearing more casual clothing that day, because we want to be mindful and supportive of the needs of all the individuals that we're interacting with.
As a part of the multidisciplinary approach that we just discussed, we participate in several other internal specialized teams. And these include the Sexual Abuse Response Team, which Jasmine discussed in the last slide, and then also the Mortality Case Coordination, where we work closely with investigators on cases involving the death of an individual that was receiving services and ensure that we're providing support to their families during the very difficult time. We are active participants in our abuse prevention work groups, which are led by the Prevention and Quality Improvement Unit, and participate along with members of other state agencies in identifying best practices around abuse prevention.
So in addition to the internal specialized team meetings, we also collaborate with external stakeholders, such as the Trauma Champions Collaborative and the Crime Victims Assistance Task Force. These meetings provide IFSU with an opportunity to get to know our stakeholders and partners and allows them to get to know the Justice Center and IFSU. For example, I'm part of the Downstate Coalition meeting with participating programs that include my area's Crime Victims Assistance Center, and others are involved with local domestic violence agencies and other programs that support victim services. We have also found that participating in these meetings promotes collaboration and increases our referral base for individuals and their families, as well as keeps us up to date with services and supports that are in our communities. Additionally, we often identify outreach opportunities where we can present or provide information at conferences and events. So if you know of any opportunities where you would like to have us present or share information, please be sure to contact us.
So before we move on to tell you about some of the other areas of the agency, we wanted to give you a brief overview of our process when it comes to how we respond to inquiries. Our process starts with a referral being received by our team. So the bulk of our referrals come from the call center, the information line, the investigations unit, which typically occurs after an individual or family member calls the Justice Center looking for additional information or support. And then once we process the referral, it's assigned to an advocate. We consider the location of the referral. So if it is an active Justice Center led case where we are likely to have an advocate participate in an in-person interview, we want to make sure that it's assigned to somebody local, along with other factors when we assign referrals, such as if an advocate had previous contact with the individual or family, similar to the case that I just had discussed earlier, where I'm working with the family on two separate incidents that were reported. At this point, the advocate will reach out and make contact with the caller, and this usually happens in 1 to 3 business days. If it's a more urgent matter, call will be made earlier, and we provide our direct contact information for future contact. So there's a direct way for you to reach us. We provide ongoing support as needed and refer the caller appropriately depending on their needs.
So we also have our ombudsman, which was also one of the stars on our map earlier. So we just want to take a few moments to tell you about what this unique role is. Our ombudsman is based out of the Utica office and regularly travels to the 2 remaining OPWDD developmental centers in New York, which are Sunmount in Tupper Lake and Valley Ridge in Norwich. The ombudsman is considered a frontline advocate who supports individuals in expressing their concerns so that their needs are being heard, their rights are being acknowledged, and identified problems are being resolved. The ombudsman facilitates a self-advocacy committee for individuals receiving services in these facilities, and they strongly encourage and promote self-advocacy and self-determination, as well as educate individuals to better enable them to working towards making healthy and informed choices. In addition, the ombudsman helps identify any systemic trends or issues that may be present and work towards advocating for change in these facilities.
Okay, so Ombudsman addresses systemic trends by supporting self-advocacy initiatives through participation in more than 1,000 committee and treatment team meetings annually. And in 2024, 2,666 advocacy and support services were provided, and 652 contacts and follow-ups with individuals and family members occurred.
I have one question for you. What kinds of things do you ever meet with? Would you ever meet with a family member and a service provider agency about any particular issue? Maybe about concerns about services, or would you meet about corrective action plans, or how would you handle that?
So a lot of times when there's systemic issues between a family and a provider agency, we try to initiate that contact through the phone first, try to set up more of a mediation directly with the family and the provider agency. A lot of times I try to give the family directives first, help them outline what they really want to discuss so that they can meet with the provider themselves. And if they have a caseworker that's set up, directed to have that person as the front line. If it's something that's continued to ongo where they're not receiving responses from the provider, I sometimes will reach out to the provider directly just to understand why there's no communication. Again, most of that is done primarily through the phone. The few times where I am face-to-face with someone at the provider agency is if I am doing the interview with the individual at the provider agency and then I'm making contact with someone while I'm there.
Great. So we give family members the tools that they need to help them communicate their needs with the provider. Very good. That one question about the ombudsman, does the ombudsman have contact with families of individuals living in the developmental centers?
Yes, so they provide the same services that an advocate that's not an ombudsman does as well. So they provide the same role. They just have more of an interface with the developmental centers that are based out of Tupper Lake and Norwich.
Okay, great. I'm going to answer the last two questions that are up here, and then we can go on. The Individual and Family Support Unit does provide support even if an incident is unsubstantiated, and the Individual and Family Support Unit will work with law enforcement when ever necessary or appropriate. All right, carry on.
So we also have a variety of resources that are very helpful in explaining what our role is and the services that we provide. All of these resources can be found on the Justice Center webpage, and most are also in print. Today, we'll be focusing on several that we regularly utilize and that individuals and families have found to be the most helpful. And we will be sharing the links for these resources in the chat box as we go along.
Okay, so on our website, you can find our disability resources page. It is user-friendly, and the page provides info on programs, services, laws, and regulations. It includes categories like transportation, healthcare, housing, and information about our technology-related assistance for individuals with disabilities or trade. It's another acronym for you. And it is very search and user-friendly. You can scan the QR code. And this will also be placed in the chat box.
So these are a few examples of some of the brochures that we have at the Justice Center. Again, all of which these can be found on the website. The first on the left is our guidance brochure, which basically outlines the overall structure of what happens during investigation from start to finish, as well as the information that you can expect to know while investigation is occurring. We also have brochures for the mortality review investigations and Jonathan's Law, which is the records access information for some of the state agencies that we have jurisdiction over, as well as information for crime victims. And then we also do have pocket resource cards, which are a brief little overview of what services we provide, as well as the contact numbers to reach out if you think you are a victim or you know someone who may be a victim.
So the Justice Center has established layers of safeguards as well as produced materials meant to help providers prevent and protect vulnerable individuals from abuse and neglect. So there are some agency self-assessments, best practices for abuse-free environments, code of conduct, and toolkits. And this link will also be dropped in the chat box, so you can scan the QR code now.
So we are also involved with the New York State Trauma Informed Network. This resource provides you with great information about trauma response practices and allows you to network with other organizations across New York State. It also has search resources. It allows you to search resources, post resources, and events that promote trauma response practices. And the link will be posted to the chat as well.
But we do have a great video series which provides a lot of good information and explains our mission, prevention resources, and the importance of reporting abuse and neglect with brief videos that are available right on our site. Again, you can scan the QR code and then the link will be in the chat box for this one.
I'm sorry, we have just a couple questions before the break. So can a family contact the Individual and Family Support Unit if they have questions about reports of incidents that occurred in the past and maybe they think that there's still some outstanding questions? Can they contact you about things that happened in the past?
Yes, they can contact us. And usually when they make that call, it's helpful to have that incident or confirmation number. If they don't have that like that incident or confirmation number, then as much information as they can give as possible would be helpful. So maybe
Great.
some details.
And then there's a question I'm going to try and answer, but you can chime in if you think that there's needs to be more to it. But someone wanted to know if, person receiving services is verbal or, not very verbal. How can they be sure that the investigator who's doing the investigation is aware of that? Sometimes families don't know about things until the very last minute. We encourage, provider agencies to make sure that the investigators know as much as possible about a person so that if we're doing the investigation, we know that that person isn't verbal and can make appropriate adjustments. And if an investigator saw something, they might contact the individual and family support unit. But if at any point in time during an investigation or even after an interview, you have questions or concerns, go ahead and contact the individual and family support unit, and we will do everything we can to assist you with that. Anything to add, Jasmine or Athena?
Yeah, I was just going to add, the investigators are very thorough. I think that they do, even if the information isn't given to them right away, they'll ask, someone that might work very closely with them or have a great relationship. And even if they're nonverbal or not, I guess like wouldn't be able to hold like this, present this presentation and say all of our acronyms. They still are entitled to an interview. So at times when they feel that it would be beneficial, they will still interview the individual that's receiving services.
Mhm. Along with that, we also utilize interpreter services. So even if English is not the individual's first language, if they utilize sign, we do make sure that there is someone there who is qualified to direct all of that information to the investigator as well as to the individual. And we do the same with family members as well if they don't speak English. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now going to be talking about effective advocacy. And advocacy is undeniably one of the most crucial aspects of our work and plays a key role in supporting communities facing various challenges.
Okay, so advocates tirelessly work to ensure that the rights of vulnerable populations are safeguarded, promoting a society that values and upholds the dignity of every individual. So some types of advocacy may include self-advocacy. So this is representing or advance your own interests. Peer advocacy represents the rights and interests of someone other than yourself, such as a friend or colleague. And then systems advocacy, which is to influence social, political, economic systems to bring about change for groups of people. And then we have legal advocacy, so using attorneys and the legal or administrative system to establish or protect legal rights. Before we move on, you will hear us say this throughout the presentation often, that it's important to be mindful and aware of your body language, your tone, your responses, especially in times when there may be tension while advocating.
So effective advocacy takes on several key elements, and that includes reflection, educating yourself, knowing your rights, knowing what you're advocating for, and it takes a lot of planning. It's very important to have a plan when you're advocating for a right or issue, and making sure that you're taking time to do this is critical to advocating effectively. A plan allows you to act as an advocate in a thoughtful way and resolve the problem more quickly if it's one that can be resolved. And having a solid strategy helps you to feel comfortable and confident in reaching your advocacy goal. It is also sometimes best to know that best laid plans fail, so to achieve your identified goal. So learning how to negotiate a compromise is also an important component to effective advocacy.
Okay, so when developing your plan, it's important to break down the problem or issue, educate yourself about the issue, and know your rights. So you have to know the issue at hand to advocate effectively. Often when people advocate on their own behalf, there's several issues at hand. So it's important to break the issue down. Sometimes you have to advocate for one issue at a time or chunk the issue out. So, figuring out what's most important. If you advocate for too many issues all at once, it can confuse what you're advocating for, and then your message doesn't get across as clear. So prioritizing needs to occur prior to stepping into any form of advocacy. And then you can scan the QR code here for a guide to effective advocacy.
So who are the key people? Knowing what the organization of your advocacy is key. So you want to know who you need to contact, who the decision makers and institutions that make or influence the decisions on your issue. This involves identifying both the institutions and the actual specific individuals who directly make and implement these policies, as well as those who can indirectly influence decision makers and determine what their positions on relevant issues and actions are, their degree of influence, their resources, and interests. So you also want to know what the social and political context is, if there is any that relates to the problem, as well as what the options are for change. So you want to analyze what the problem's causes are, the effects, again, who the key people are, and possible policy contexts. And it may be possible to develop recommendations for possible solutions or changes that are necessary in order to address the problem. So you want to make sure that you have all of this information, and you want to make sure that you're keeping that organized. So knowing who you're speaking to, when you're speaking to them, how you're speaking to them, creating a narrative of what each conversation is, and then you're following up with that as well as what else you need to do to move forward. So similar to the effective guide to advocacy, we also have a effective guide to communication. These are guides that were created as a result of collaborative efforts between the Justice Center and OPWDD, and results of feedback that were received from separate roundtables with providers and families. These guides are helpful for personal representatives, family members, and provider agency staff in order to gain these skills. And again, you can either scan the QR code or receive the information in the chat.
So 65% of the message is sent non-verbally. So become sensitive to nonverbal messages. Look for things such as body position, movement, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, even silence, the use of space and time. This is something that we utilize during interviews. If we're accompanying someone on an interview, this is something that we might pay attention to. And this is, especially facial expressions. If someone's being quiet and they appear uncomfortable to answer questions, that might be a good time for us to step in as their advocate and ask, are you okay? Do you have any questions? Are you understanding what the question is? Or do you even need a break? So some communication tips are to be calm, be confident, to be respectful, watch your tone again, your body language, and own up to any mistakes that you have made. If you're asking for 200 and you say 2,000, then you say, I apologize. We did agree on 200. Ask for clarification or examples depending on the situation. Use pauses if needed. Keep your voice calm, lower if needed. Don't let others talk over you, but be respectful. You can say something like, I know that you have an important point to make, but can I just finish what I was saying first?
Another part of effective communication is active listening. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining eye contact, you're nodding your head appropriately, and that you're being transparent as you're listening. One thing we like to say is that you're listening to learn and then you're responding. So you want to be assertive, and but you also want to recognize all sides of an issue. And you don't want to answer a question you don't necessarily know the answer to. You can say that it's a great question and that you can get back to someone at a later date. You want to make sure that you're still giving them all the right information, even if you don't know it at that moment. So some active listening tips, again, are to remain empathetic and understanding to what's being told to you. You're judging the content and not the delivery of the information. And you want to make sure that you're continually giving the speaker your full attention and that you're keeping your own emotions in check, because you want to make sure that you're understanding what's being told to you. And with that, you can listen for the main idea and take notes, but you also want to keep an open mind.
Okay, so now that you have delivered your advocacy message, there is a number of things that you want to follow up on in both the short and long term. So in short term, did the target commit to anything specific? How did they communicate this commitment? Did they tell you they would give you a call to provide you with a status update, or were they following up on something? If your target makes a commitment, it's a good idea to repeat the commitment in person during the meeting, as well as in a follow-up email, phone call, or letter. Even if the commitment is simply to keep you informed about something, you want to make it clear that you understand the commitment that's been made. So during the meeting, we're following up on the 17th at 2 p.m. This is my number. This is where you're going to contact me. And then in a follow-up email, thank you again for taking the time to meet with me today. Looking forward to speaking with you on the 17th at 2 p.m. Again, here's my contact information. It may be appropriate to ask for confirmation of the commitment and or the deadline by which you want your target to meet it at. Remember that you may be reporting back to coalition partners as well as your own organization, so you need to be clear about the outcomes of your meeting. In the longer term, you want to monitor, has your target met their commitment? If so, you should contact them to acknowledge this, and if not, you should remind them so that they know that you're serious about holding them to their commitments. Are there circumstances that might cause you to revise your advocacy message or your strategy? Are there new developments making the issue more pressing? Are there new stakeholders? And has your target situation changed? Follow-up is also an important component of monitoring. So again, you can send an email, try to call. If you don't get an answer when you call, leaving a voicemail with your information and a good time to call you back. And remember that advocacy requires long-term relationship building that advocacy targets. So don't get discouraged if 1 or 2 meetings don't yield big changes. Remember that any progress is good progress.
So to summarize what we've been discussing, you want to make sure that, again, you know your issue, you're researching the issue that you want to advocate for, and that you're staying up to date on the relevant concerns. You want to ensure that you're prepared so that you're developing a plan and preparing notes about what your concerns are. You also want to make sure that you're concise so that you're keeping your message brief, jargon-free, and straightforward. You also want to be specific. So you're defining the issue or problem that you have and be very specific about what you're asking for. You also want to support your points so that you're using facts and data in order to support your argument. And you want to connect with your audience. So you're engaging with your target with an opening statement and connecting your issue to the values and concerns that you have. And you also want to consider your medium. So different types of advocacy may require different talking points. An example being that like legislative testimony should be brief, while letters to an editor can include more personal stories or anecdotes. So you want to make sure that the information you're giving is relevant to the medium that you're providing. So you want to set your goals. So we consider these to be SMART goals, which your advocacy objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
Thank you, Jasmine and Athena. There's one question. You've given a lot of tips, but are there any additional tips you might offer to families who, are being told by a provider agency that something specific is going to be done, and then it keeps on not being done? What would you recommend when those unfortunate situations occur?
So I would suggest, again, like how we stated earlier, documenting that. I know a lot of people like to talk on the phone, but following that up with an email, getting information in writing so that you have a recorded account of what's supposed to be done. Also keeping track of these communications, who you're speaking with. If you have other professionals that work with you, like case managers, or you have personal advocates that you're working with in like mental health or developmental disabilities, depending on who you're working with, looping them in so it's not just a single communication with one person that you're going back and forth with, because it might be that you're communicating with someone, they're telling you one thing, but the other people involved don't even know that that's occurring. So if you're having ongoing issues, making sure that you're looping several people in so it's more of a community understanding of what next steps are.
Thank you very much.
And I was also going to add, just, asking maybe like if there's any barriers to the issue being handled in like a timely manner or at all, just to find out. I think sometimes, you know, it's not good to promise that things can get done, but maybe that they're working on it. So maybe that's something that they're doing. And then there's just a barrier to it happening when they originally agreed for it to happen. Okay, so as we mentioned before, we are available to provide support and information. You can email our support coordinator email, call our information line at the number provided, and feel free to scan the QR code for this information as well. As a reminder, we do respond to majority of referrals within 1 to 3 business days. And again, this information will be in the chat box.
So we also do have a family engagement series. So within this series, you can learn more about the services and supports that are available for people receiving services, as well as family members, personal representatives who are navigating the investigation process. Again, you can scan the QR code on the slide or the information will be provided. And these are the next 3 upcoming dates for that series. So whichever one works best for your schedule, we recommend everyone sign up.
There are no remaining questions. So I think thank you both for all the information. And don't forget, you can, if you had a question and you think about it afterwards, just reach out to us and we will answer as many as we can. So